The rusty Anchor Diner stood like a weathered lighthouse on the edge of Highway 17, 30 miles from the nearest Arizona town. Its neon sign flickered against the gathering darkness, fighting valiantly against the approaching storm. Inside, the warm glow of fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the worn linoleum floor, illuminating a place trapped in time. Rain began to pelt the large windows, each drop racing down the glass like tears on a weathered cheek. The radio crackled behind the counter, static interrupting the country tune as the announcer's voice cut through with practiced urgency. The National Weather Service has issued a severe storm warning for Maricopa County. Flash flooding expected along Highway 17. All residents advised to seek shelter and avoid travel until further notice. Riley Matthews wiped her hands on her faded blue apron and reached over to turn up the volume, her movements efficient and precise. At 25, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen more of the world than most. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, revealing high cheekbones and eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes now narrowed at the weather report, calculating, assessing. "Sounds like we're in for a rough night," she said to no one in particular, her voice calm and steady. The dinner rush, such as it was, had dwindled to a handful of regulars. 2 truck drivers nursed coffee at the counter, speaking in the hushed tones of men accustomed to long silences. An elderly couple occupied a booth by the window, sharing a slice of apple pie, their hands occasionally meeting across the table in the comfortable familiarity of decades together. Riley moved between tables with practiced efficiency, refilling coffee cups, clearing plates. To the casual observer, she was just another waitress in another roadside diner. Nothing special, nothing to remember. That was exactly how she preferred it. Her hand unconsciously reached up to touch the worn military dog tags hidden beneath her uniform shirt. The cool metal against her skin was a constant reminder of who she really was and what she had lost. As she turned to head back to the counter, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing a glimpse of the thin scar on her wrist before she tugged the fabric back down. Beneath the counter, out of sight of customers, sat an old military-grade radio. Riley's thumb brushed over the transmit button as she passed, a habit formed over years of service. The gesture was almost a ritual, a connection to another life, another identity. "Storm's picking up," said one of the truck drivers, glancing nervously at the windows where rain now lashed in earnest. "Think I'll hit the road before it gets any worse." "Smart move," Riley replied, sliding his check across the counter. "Roads tend to flood quick out here." As the drivers paid and left, the bell above the door jingling their departure, Riley felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Something about tonight felt different. Wrong, the sensation was one she had learned never to ignore. A sixth sense developed in places where attention to detail meant the difference between life and death. The door to the back office opened, and Frank Weston emerged, his substantial frame filling the doorway. At 60, Frank's once powerful physique had softened, but he still moved with the deliberate purpose of a man who had spent 20 years in the Navy. His silver hair was cropped short, his face lined with the weathering of both time and experience. Despite his imposing presence, his eyes carried a permanent shadow of anxiety, a man haunted by memories he couldn't escape. "Radio says the storm's going to be a bad one," he said, his voice gruff but tinged with concern. "Might want to call it an early night." Riley shook her head. "Few more hours yet, Frank. The elderly couple just ordered more coffee, and we've still got lights. No sense sending everyone out into that mess if they don't have to go." Frank nodded, his gaze drifting to the wall of photographs in his office visible through the open door. Military portraits, ships, groups of uniformed men standing arm in arm. And there, turned face down among the upright frames, a single photograph that Frank never acknowledged but couldn't bring himself to remove. "Your call," he said finally. "Just keep an eye on the weather." Their relationship transcended the typical boss-employee dynamic. Frank had hired Riley 2 years ago when she had appeared in town with nothing but a duffel bag and determination. No questions asked, no references required. Something in his eyes had recognized something in hers, the look of a warrior seeking refuge from battles both past and present. As Frank retreated to his office, the low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky, vibrating through the building. The elderly couple exchanged worried glances, then reluctantly gathered their belongings. "Better get home before the creek rises." the man said, helping his wife with her coat. Thank you, dear, he added, pressing a generous tip into Riley's hand. As they left, Riley felt that prickle of unease intensify. The diner was now empty, a rare occurrence even on stormy nights. The silence felt heavy, expectant, broken only by the persistent drumming of rain against the roof and the occasional growl of thunder. She was wiping down the counter when she heard it, the distinctive rumble of motorcycles, multiple engines approaching through the storm. Her hand instinctively moved toward the radio beneath the counter, then stopped. Wait. Assess. That was the protocol. The headlights appeared first, cutting through the rain-blurred windows like searchlights. 4 motorcycles pulled into the parking lot, their riders dismounting in synchronized movements despite the downpour. Even through the rain-streaked glass, there was no mistaking the patches on their leather jackets. Hell's Angels. Riley took a deep breath, centering herself. The lead rider was tall and powerfully built, his movements suggesting military precision despite his civilian appearance. As the group approached the entrance, she positioned herself behind the counter, alert but projecting the casual demeanor of a waitress preparing to serve late-night customers. The bell jangled harshly as the door swung open. The men entered in a rush of cold air and the scent of rain-soaked leather, water dripping from their jackets onto the floor, forming small puddles that reflected the overhead lights. The leader removed his helmet, revealing a face weathered by sun and experience. His beard, once dark, was now streaked with silver, framing features that seemed carved from stone. He stood approximately 6'2", broad-shouldered and solid, carrying himself with the unmistakable bearing of a man accustomed to command. A silver ring gleamed on his right hand, bearing the insignia of an eagle. Behind him followed 3 others. A muscular man in his early 40s with hawkish features and vigilant eyes, a younger barrel-chested rider with forearms covered in tattoos, and an older man, perhaps 65, who moved with a pronounced limp, supporting himself with a walking cane disguised as a wooden staff. As the leader's eyes met Riley's, something passed between them. A flicker of recognition neither could place. It vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only questions in its wake. Evening, Brar, Riley said, her tone professional but warm. Rough night to be riding. Seen worse, the leader replied, his voice a deep rumble that matched the thunder outside. Got caught in the storm's path, looking for a place to wait it out. He scanned the diner with practiced efficiency, noting exits, windows, potential threats. A soldier's assessment. Kitchen's still open, Riley offered, gesturing to the empty booths. Take your pick. The men chose a corner booth with clear sight lines to both the entrance and the back door. As they settled in, Riley couldn't help but notice how they positioned themselves, the leader facing the main entrance, the older man with the cane angled to observe the kitchen door, the other 2 with views of the parking lot. Not random seating, tactical positioning. As she approached with menus, she caught a glimpse of something beneath the leader's jacket. Dog tags, similar to her own, briefly visible when he adjusted his position. When he reached for the menu, his sleeve pulled back slightly, revealing a G-Shock watch, its face scratched and worn, with a small crack in one corner. He unconsciously rotated it on his wrist, a nervous habit or perhaps a comfort gesture. Name's Logan, he said, looking up at her with eyes that had seen combat. That's Hawk, Diesel, and we call the old-timer Old School. Old School snorted, his weathered face creasing into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Respect your elders, son. I was riding when you were still crawling. Riley nodded acknowledgement. I'm Riley. What can I get you? Logan scanned the menu briefly. Got any SOS on this menu? The question caught her off guard, not because of the request, but because she immediately understood the reference. SOS, cream chipped beef on toast, a military staple. Navy men called it shit on a shingle. It wasn't on the menu, but she knew exactly what he meant. I can make that happen, she replied without missing a beat. A flicker of surprise crossed Logan's face, quickly replaced by appreciation. Military? Riley gave a non-committal shrug. I know the lingo. As she turned toward the kitchen, she felt Logan's gaze following her. Not predatory, but curious, evaluative. The way one soldier sizes up another. In the kitchen, Riley relayed the order to the short order cook, then paused by the small security monitor mounted near the pass-through window. The screen showed the parking lot from various angles, and something caught her eye, a black SUV with a damaged front fender, parked just at the edge of the property, headlights off. As she watched, a figure moved inside the vehicle, the brief glow of a cell phone illuminating a face for just a moment. The phone at the counter rang, startling her. Riley crossed quickly to answer it. Rusty Anchor Diner. How's the weather out there? A male voice, calm and measured. Riley's posture straightened imperceptibly, getting worse by the minute. Any interesting travelers seeking shelter? The question seemed casual, but Riley recognized the coded inquiry. Just some road-weary bikers passing through. Her response was equally measured, conveying information in what appeared to be small talk. Keep your eyes open. Storms bring out all kinds. The voice paused. Phoenix office reports snakes moving in the rain. Riley's grip on the phone tightened. Understood. I'll keep the coffee hot. She hung up, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. The call confirmed her instincts. Something was happening tonight, something beyond a simple storm and stranded bikers. She glanced back at the security monitor. The SUV was still there, but now she could make out the silhouettes of multiple occupants. When she returned to the dining area with coffee pot in hand, she studied the Hells Angels with new attention. Logan was leaning forward, speaking quietly to his companions, his posture suggesting urgency. As she approached, they immediately ceased conversation. Coffee while you wait, she offered. As she poured, she noticed Logan's phone on the table, screen illuminated with what appeared to be a warning text. He quickly flipped it over, but not before she glimpsed the words Vipers and moving tonight. Appreciate it, Logan said, his eyes meeting hers with intensity that suggested he was measuring how much to say. Looks like we might be here a while. Storm's not letting up, and now there's flash flood warnings on the highway back to Phoenix. Riley nodded, setting the coffee pot down and leaning slightly against the table. Radio says it might be morning before the road's clear. She paused, then added with deliberate casualness, doesn't seem like the kind of night anyone should be out if they don't have to be. Logan's eyes narrowed slightly at her emphasis. No, he agreed slowly. It doesn't. The older man, old school, was watching the exchange with shrewd eyes. He tapped his cane against the floor twice, a signal Riley realized, as Logan immediately straightened and turned his attention to the window. The black SUV had moved closer to the diner, its headlights now on, illuminating the rain in harsh beams. As they watched, a second SUV pulled in beside it. Friends of yours? Riley asked, though she already knew the answer. Not exactly, Logan replied, his voice hardening. How many ways out of this place? Front door, kitchen exit and back. Fire door by the bathrooms, Riley answered without hesitation, her response too quick and detailed for a typical waitress. Logan caught it, his gaze sharpening as he reassessed her. You always pay such close attention to exit routes? I like to know my options, she replied evenly. He nodded slowly. You might want to find Frank. Tell him to lock up early. We've got trouble coming. The fact that he knew Frank's name without being told confirmed Riley's suspicion. Logan knew more about the Rusty Anchor than a random traveler should. Already figured that much, she said, dropping the waitress persona slightly. Question is, what kind of trouble? And is it yours or mine? Before Logan could answer, the front door burst open. 5 men entered, moving with purposeful aggression. Unlike the Hells Angels in their distinctive leather jackets, these men wore nondescript dark clothing, their faces hard and expressions cold. The lead man, tall and lean with a snake tattoo visible on his neck, scanned the diner until his gaze locked on Logan. Riley recognized the look in his eyes, pure hatred mixed with satisfaction at finding prey. Well, well, the man said, his voice carrying easily across the now silent diner. Logan Sullivan, long way from your territory. Logan stood slowly, positioning himself between the newcomers and his companions. Jackson. Didn't expect to see vipers slithering around these parts. The tension in the room crystallized into something tangible, a gathering storm of its own. Riley stepped back from the table, her mind rapidly processing options and outcomes. Frank, she called toward the office, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable warning. We've got a situation. Frank appeared in the doorway, took one look at the standoff, and paled visibly. But to Riley's surprise, rather than retreating, he moved to stand behind the counter, his hand disappearing beneath it to where she knew he kept a shotgun mounted. "Gentlemen," Frank said, his voice steadier than his complexion suggested, "whatever business you have, it doesn't happen in my establishment." Jackson, the Viper leader, spared Frank only the briefest glance. "This isn't about you, old man. This is club business. Stay out of it, and you might walk away." "There's no club business here," Logan responded, his posture shifting subtly into a fighting stance. "Just men trying to wait out a storm." Jackson laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "That's fitting. A storm. Been brewing a long time, hasn't it, Sullivan? Ever since your boys hit our shipment at the border." Riley's attention sharpened at this. Border shipments suggested drug trafficking, exactly the kind of operation that might interest federal agencies. The pieces were beginning to align. "Your shipment was illegal," Logan replied evenly, "and it wasn't my call. Take it up with the feds." "Oh, we will," Jackson said, his smile widening to reveal teeth that seemed too sharp in the fluorescent light. "Right after we finish with you." Everything happened at once. Two of the Vipers lunged at Logan, grabbing his shoulders and pinning him against the booth. A third delivered a vicious blow to his temple that sent blood spattering across the table. The elderly Hawk and Diesel rose to defend him, but the remaining Vipers intercepted them, the diner erupting into chaos. Old School struggled to his feet, his cane now revealed as a weapon as he pulled a hidden blade from within it. But one of the attackers kicked his bad leg, sending him crashing to the floor with a grunt of pain. Logan fought back with the precision of trained combat, his elbow connecting with one attacker's sternum, driving the air from the man's lungs. But the odds were against him, 5 trained fighters against 4, with surprise on their side. Frank shouted from behind the counter, his voice lost in the din of breaking glass and overturning furniture. His hand emerged with the shotgun, but he hesitated to fire in the confined space with allies and enemies so intertwined. Riley watched it all unfold in what felt like slow motion, her training kicking in automatically. She noted the specific fighting styles of each attacker, identifying the most dangerous threats. The man with the snake tattoo, Jackson, hung back slightly, directing the assault. Another attacker had a distinctive limp, favoring his right leg. A third had a raven tattoo on his left forearm, partially visible beneath his sleeve. Most crucially, she saw Jackson reach into his jacket and withdraw a large hunting knife, the blade catching the overhead lights as he moved purposefully toward Logan, who was now bleeding from a cut above his eye, momentarily dazed from the initial assault. It was the knife that decided her. This wasn't just a beating, it was an attempted murder. In one fluid motion, Riley reached beneath her apron and withdrew the concealed radio. Her thumb found the transmit button with practiced ease as she spoke in a clear, controlled voice that bore no resemblance to the friendly waitress persona. "Sparrow to Eagle 6 Alpha situation at Rusty Anchor. 5 Cobra hostiles, 1 with an edged weapon. SEAL target pinned down. Request immediate backup." The radio crackled with a brief acknowledgement as Riley set it down and moved without hesitation toward the fight. Her entire demeanor transformed, the efficient waitress replaced by a combat-ready operative moving with lethal purpose. Jackson raised the knife, poised to strike at Logan's exposed chest. Riley's hand closed around a heavy ceramic coffee mug. With precision born of countless training hours, she hurled it directly at Jackson's wrist. The impact was perfect, striking the exact point where tendons meet bone. The knife clattered to the floor as Jackson howled in pain and surprise. The sudden intervention created a momentary pause in the assault as all eyes turned to Riley. Logan, despite his injuries, registered shock that quickly transformed into recognition as the military dog tag slipped from beneath Riley's shirt, now visible against her uniform. "Who the fuck are you?" Jackson snarled, cradling his injured wrist. Riley didn't bother to answer. She was already moving, her body flowing into combat stances ingrained through years of training. As 2 of the Vipers abandoned Logan to intercept this new threat, she ducked beneath a wild swing, using the attacker's momentum against him. Her hand caught his extended arm, twisting with precise leverage that sent pain shooting through his shoulder joint. With minimal effort, she redirected his momentum, sending him crashing into his companion. Logan, seizing the opportunity her intervention created, drove his knee into the groin of the man still holding him, then delivered a devastating elbow strike to the man's temple. Blood streaming down his face, he locked eyes with Riley across the chaos of the diner, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. "The knife," she called, kicking it toward him as she pivoted to face the next attacker. Logan snatched the blade from the floor, immediately shifting his grip to a reverse hold that spoke of professional training. "Cover Frank," he shouted, recognizing the strategic importance of the shotgun. As Riley fought, memories flickered through her mind, training sessions in sterile facilities, instructors pushing her beyond normal human limits. She remembered the praise that had followed one particularly grueling exercise. "Matthews, your ability to blend in and observe is invaluable. You can disappear in a crowd but see everything. That's why you're perfect for this." A viper with the raven tattoo charged her, more cautious now that he'd seen her capabilities. He feinted left, then struck right, a coordinated attack that would have overwhelmed an average opponent. But Riley was far from average. She parried the blow with her forearm, the impact revealing the edge of a long scar that ran from wrist to elbow, a souvenir from a previous mission gone wrong. Logan saw the scar as he dispatched his own attacker, his eyes widening in recognition. "Mosul?" he called out, the word carrying weight beyond its syllables. "Lightning finds its way home," Riley responded automatically, the coded response confirming what Logan had begun to suspect. Their eyes met across the diner, mutual recognition dawning fully now. They had served together a lifetime ago, it seemed, in a classified operation in the Middle East. Different units, different chains of command, but the same mission, the same oath. This shared history transformed their fighting from individual efforts to coordinated partnership. Without words, they began to move in sync, Logan covering her blind spots as she did the same for him. Riley's hand signals, quick, subtle gestures, communicated strategy that Logan interpreted and executed flawlessly. Jackson, nursing his injured wrist, backed toward the door, rage contorting his features as he watched his ambush disintegrate into failure. "Hawk!" he shouted. "Now!" To everyone's shock, Hawk, Logan's own companion, suddenly produced a pistol from his jacket, aiming not at the Vipers, but at Logan himself. "Sorry, brother," Hawk said, his expression conflicted but determined. "Business is business." Logan froze, betrayal washing over his face like a physical blow. "You?" he whispered. "After everything." The momentary distraction was all Jackson needed. He lunged forward, retrieving a second knife from his boot. As he charged toward Logan, time seemed to slow once more for Riley. She calculated trajectories, analyzed options, made her decision. 3 rapid strides brought her between Logan and the oncoming blade. She pivoted, catching Jackson's wrist in a joint lock that threatened to snap bone. With her other hand, she delivered a precision strike to his throat. Not enough to kill, but sufficient to disable. As he gasped for air, she completed the movement by driving her knee into his sternum, sending him crashing backward into a table that splintered under his impact. The diner had become a battlefield, the storm outside matched by the violence within. Frank, seeing an opening, finally fired the shotgun, not directly at anyone, but into the ceiling. The deafening report froze everyone momentarily. "Enough!" Frank roared, his voice carrying the unmistakable command presence of a naval officer. "Next one goes center mass." In the momentary pause that followed, Riley's radio crackled to life. "Eagle 6 to Sparrow, be advised. Additional hostile vehicles spotted approaching your location. Backup delayed due to flooding. ETA 30 minutes minimum. Repeat, you are on your own for at least 30 minutes." The news should have been demoralizing, but Riley's expression remained impassive. She had operated without support before. So had Logan, judging by the grim determination in his eyes. What happened next surprised everyone. Hawk, still holding his gun, suddenly shifted his aim to Jackson. "Federal agent," he announced, his voice steady. "Everyone down, hands where I can see them." Logan stared in disbelief. "What the—" "Deep cover, Jam," Hawk explained quickly, not taking his eyes off the Vipers. 2 years embedded with Vipers tracking their distribution network. Was supposed to be extracted next week. He glanced at Logan, regret evident in his features. "Couldn't blow my cover, even for you. But I'm not letting them kill you." The revelation recalibrated the entire situation. Riley immediately understood. Hawk wasn't a traitor, but an undercover agent, likely DEA or FBI, tasked with infiltrating the Viper's drug operation. Jackson, still struggling for breath from Riley's throat strike, glared with pure hatred. "You're dead," he wheezed. "All of you. Our brothers are coming. 15 men, armed. You think this was bad? Just wait." Riley exchanged glances with Logan, then with Hawk and Frank. The immediate threat was neutralized, but a greater one approached. With roads flooded and backup delayed, they were effectively trapped in the diner with enemies inbound. "Riley," Logan said, using her name for the first time with the weight of recognition behind it. "Who exactly are you?" Before she could answer, Frank stepped from behind the counter, shotgun still ready, but now pointed at the floor. "She's Alexandra Thorne," he said quietly. "Special Agent Alexandra Thorne. And she's Jake's daughter." Logan's face transformed as the name registered. "Jake? Jake Thorne from Kandahar?" Riley, Alexandra nodded once, the professional mask slipping just enough to reveal the pain beneath. "My father," she confirmed. "He saved my life," Logan said softly. "Took a bullet meant for me." "I know," she replied. "And now we have about 15 minutes before we're overrun by armed hostiles." Her gaze swept the diner, assessing resources, planning defense. "So I suggest we table the reunion and focus on survival." Outside, the storm reached new intensity, lightning illuminating the parking lot in strobing flashes, revealing 3 more SUVs approaching through the deluge. Inside, Riley and Logan stood amid the wreckage of the diner, bloodied but unbowed as the true battle loomed ahead. The night was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. The diner had transformed from sanctuary to fortress in a matter of minutes. Tables overturned to create barriers, windows covered with whatever could be found, makeshift weapons distributed among the defenders. In the eye of this storm of preparation stood Riley, or Alexandra, as she was now revealed to be, issuing directives with the quiet authority of someone born to command. "Frank, secure the back door. Use the freezer rack. Diesel, take inventory of anything we can use as weapons from the kitchen. Old school, find a position with elevation and clear sight lines to the parking lot." Her voice was calm but carried an unmistakable urgency as she drew a rough diagram of the diner on the back of an order pad, marking strategic points. Logan watched her work, his tactical mind appreciating the efficiency of her planning. Despite the blood drying on his temple and the pain radiating from his ribs, he stood tall, his focus absolute. He adjusted the recovered knife in his hand, testing its balance and weight. 3 vehicles means at least 9 hostiles. Probably more, he said, wiping blood from his eye with his sleeve. "They'll split into teams, try to overwhelm us from multiple entry points." Alexandra nodded. "Standard envelopment tactic. We need to channel them, create choke points." Hawk, still training his weapon on the subdued vipers, called over his shoulder. "My agency knows I'm here. They'll send backup once they realize I've blown cover." "Not soon enough," Alexandra replied, tapping the radio clipped to her belt. "Roads are flooded. My people can't get through for at least half an hour. We're on our own." The lightning flashed outside, illuminating the parking lot where the SUVs were now positioning strategically, forming a semicircle around the diner's entrance. Rain hammered against the windows, nature's own percussion to the unfolding drama. Frank returned from securing the back door, his movements more purposeful now, the shadow of anxiety replaced by the focused demeanor of a naval officer. "Doors barricaded. Won't hold forever, but it'll slow them down." He glanced at the vipers sitting against the wall under Hawk's watchful eye. "What about them?" "Secure them in the freezer," Alexandra decided. "It locks from the outside. They won't freeze in the short term, but they won't be rejoining the fight either." As Diesel and Frank moved to escort the prisoners, Logan approached Alexandra. In the artificial light of the diner, his weathered features seemed carved from stone, eyes intense beneath the streak of blood on his forehead. "Jake Thorne's daughter," he said softly, the words carrying weight beyond their syllables. "I never knew he had a child." Alexandra's professional mask slipped just slightly, revealing a glimpse of the person beneath the operative. "He was discreet about his family. For our protection. He was a good man," Logan said. "Best I ever served with. He talked about you, though, never by name. Always my little girl back home." Said she was smart as a whip, stubborn as hell. A ghost of a smile touched Alexandra's lips. That sounds like him. Logan rotated the G-Shock watch on his wrist, a nervous habit that now carried new significance as Alexandra recognized it. That was his, wasn't it? Logan nodded. He gave it to me right before the mission. Said his timing was always off. Thought it might bring me better luck. His voice roughened. Guess it did. I lived. He didn't. The moment of connection was interrupted as Old School called out from his position by the window. They're moving. Looks like they're gearing up. Alexandra's focus returned instantly to the tactical situation. Frank, once those prisoners are secure, I need you on the shotgun. You're our heaviest firepower. Frank hesitated, an unspoken question in his eyes. I know about your PTSD, Frank, she said quietly. Dad told me. But right now, we need the officer, not the diner manager. Frank straightened, something in his bearing shifting as decades-old training resurfaced. Naval Lieutenant Commander Franklin Weston, at your service, Agent Thorne. He offered a crisp salute that belonged in another lifetime. As they returned to their preparations, Logan pulled Alexandra aside. How long have you known who I was? I didn't, she admitted. Not until tonight. I knew Hell's Angels frequented this place, and we suspected they had information on the Viper's distribution network. But I didn't know you'd be here or that you knew my father. Logan studied her, piecing together fragments of a larger puzzle. 2 years undercover as a waitress. That's dedication. 18 months, she corrected. And it wasn't all undercover work. After what happened to Dan, I needed space. This place became more than an assignment. Before Logan could respond, the sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. A bottle crashed through one of the side windows, flames erupting as the Molotov cocktail exploded against the floor. Fire in the hole, Old School shouted, diving away from the flames. Diesel grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall, directing the chemical spray at the spreading fire. Alexandra and Logan ducked behind the counter as gunfire erupted, bullets splintering wood and shattering glass throughout the diner. They're trying to flush us out, Logan shouted over the din. Standard tactic against entrenched positions. Alexandra's mind raced through options, calculating risks against dwindling time. Yama. Frank, cover the main entrance. Diesel, put out that fire, then reinforce the kitchen door. She turned to Logan. We need to thin their numbers before they organize a coordinated assault. Logan nodded, understanding instantly. Divide and conquer. Draw some of them in. Deal with them separately. Exactly. Old School, kill the main lights on my mark. The old biker positioned himself by the circuit breaker, hand poised to plunge the diner into darkness. Alexandra looked at Logan, a silent question in her eyes. He responded with a single nod. They had known each other for less than an hour, yet moved with the synchronicity of longtime partners. Now, Alexandra commanded. The lights went out, leaving only the flickering flames of the dying fire and flashes of lightning to illuminate the chaotic scene. In the sudden darkness, the attackers hesitated, their assault momentarily disrupted by the unexpected development. Alexander and Logan moved in perfect tandem, using the darkness to their advantage. They slipped through the kitchen door, positioning themselves to ambush anyone attempting to breach the rear entrance. Outside, rain hammered against the metal kitchen door as footsteps splashed through puddles. Hushed voices conferred, planning their entry. Alexandra pressed herself against the wall beside the door, knife in hand. Logan took position opposite her, his posture tense but controlled. The door handle turned slowly, the barricade groaning against the pressure. A metal tool inserted through the gap began working at the obstacle. As the door inched open, Alexandra caught Logan's eye, holding up 3 fingers, a countdown. 3, 2, 1. The door burst open, the barricade finally giving way. 2 Vipers entered, weapons raised, scanning the dark kitchen. They never saw the danger until it was too late. Alexandra struck first, her knife finding the pressure point in the first man's shoulder, temporarily paralyzing his arm. As the weapon clattered to the floor, she delivered a devastating knee strike to his sternum, driving the air from his lungs. Beside her, Logan executed a textbook takedown on the second intruder, a chokehold rendering the man unconscious in seconds. Clear, Logan whispered, securing the fallen weapons. Alexandra nodded, checking the incapacitated attackers for additional threats. 2 down, unknown number remaining. They bound the unconscious men with zip ties from Alexandra's concealed pouch, then dragged them into the walk-in pantry, securing the door. Your father taught you well, Logan observed, noting her efficient, methodical approach. He started my training early, she replied. Said the world was dangerous, especially for a girl. Wanted me to be ready for anything. A pause. Never imagined I'd use those skills to avenge him. Logan's expression darkened. Jake's death wasn't just a combat casualty, was it? No, Alexandra admitted. The official report says enemy fire, but intelligence suggested a setup. Someone leaked our position. Her eyes met Logan's. That's partly why I'm here. The trail led to the Vipers and their connections to international arms dealers, the same ones operating in Kandahar when Dad was killed. The revelation hung between them, adding new weight to their alliance. Logan was about to respond when gunfire erupted from the main diner, accompanied by Frank's booming shotgun. They're making their main push, Alexandra said. We need to get back out there. As they moved to return to the main area, Logan suddenly stiffened, his head turning toward the rain-streaked window. Wait, listen. Through the storm's cacophony came a new sound, the distinctive whoomp, whoomp, whoomp of helicopter rotors beating against the wind. Cavalry's here, Logan said, a grim smile forming beneath his bloodied beard. Alexandra frowned, checking her watch. Too early for my backup. The roads are still flooded. She pressed her radio. Sparrow to Eagle 6, confirm helicopter deployment. The radio crackled. Negative, Sparrow, no aerial assets deployed. Weather conditions prohibit flight operations. The implications settled over them like a chill. If it's not your people, Logan said slowly, then it's theirs. High-value shipment must be nearby. That's why they're hitting so hard, why Jackson was willing to risk attacking a Hell's Angel in public. The border shipment you mentioned, Alexandra realized. It's happening tonight. Logan nodded, and we're in the way. The stakes had just escalated dramatically. What had seemed like a vengeful attack against Logan now revealed itself as part of a larger operation, one worth risking a full assault on a public establishment to protect. A fresh barrage of gunfire from the main diner snapped them back to the immediate threat. They moved quickly through the kitchen, emerging into a scene of controlled chaos. Frank had taken position behind the overturned heavy metal counter, the shotgun roaring at intervals as he kept the attackers at bay. Diesel and Old School had created a crossfire from strategic points, pinning down the Vipers attempting to enter through the shattered front windows. Report, Alexandra called to Frank as she and Logan joined the defense. At least 8 outside, trying to establish a foothold, Frank shouted back between shotgun blasts. We've held so far, but they're getting bolder. Alexandra scanned the battlefield that had once been a peaceful diner, her tactical mind assessing resources, positions, vulnerabilities. Her gaze settled on the fire extinguishers mounted on the wall. Logan, she said, a plan forming. Those extinguishers, chemical foam would give us cover, blind them temporarily. Logan followed her line of thought immediately. Diesel, on my mark, hit the lights again. Old School, lay down suppressing fire to the left. Frank, right side. Alexandra grabbed 2 fire extinguishers, handing one to Logan. We charged through the middle, under cover of darkness and confusion. Hit them with the foam, then engage close quarters. They won't expect a direct counterattack. The plan was risky, borderline reckless, but time was running short. The helicopter sounds were growing louder, suggesting whatever operation the Vipers were protecting would soon be underway. 3, 2, 1, mark, Logan called. Diesel hit the lights. Old School and Frank opened fire simultaneously, forcing the attackers to seek cover. In that moment of confusion, Alexandra and Logan vaulted over their barricades and charged forward. Extinguishers at the ready, they burst through the shattered front door into the rain-soaked parking lot. The Vipers, expecting a defensive posture, were caught entirely off guard by the aggressive maneuver. Alexandra and Logan discharged the extinguishers directly into the faces of the nearest attackers, the chemical foam temporarily blinding and disorienting them. In the chaos that followed, Alexandra moved like a force of nature. Her training, combined with the raw intensity of personal vendetta, made her a lethal opponent. She disarmed the first Viper with a precision strike to the wrist, followed by an elbow to the temple that dropped him instantly. A second attacker received a devastating kick to the knee, the joint buckling with an audible crack. Beside her, Logan fought with the controlled fury of a seasoned warrior. His size and strength, coupled with expert technique, allowed him to dispatch opponents with brutal efficiency. A vicious uppercut sent one Viper sprawling into the mud. Another found himself airborne. Logan's judo throw sending him crashing into the hood of an SUV. The helicopter was now clearly visible, hovering at the edge of the property, its searchlight cutting through the rain in wide arcs. Through the downpour, Alexandra could make out figures loading large crates from a truck into the aircraft. "The shipment!" she shouted to Logan over the roar of rain and rotors. "We need to get closer. Document what's happening." Logan nodded, dispatching one final attacker with a devastating right hook. "Cover me!" They moved in tandem toward the helicopter, using the parked vehicles as cover. Alexandra withdrew a compact camera from a hidden pocket, its waterproof casing designed for exactly this kind of situation. She began documenting the operation. Faces, crate markings, vehicle license plates. The evidence could break open not just a drug trafficking case, but potentially connect to her father's death. The thought sent a surge of adrenaline through her system, sharpening her focus even further. They had almost reached the edge of the property when a familiar voice cut through the storm. "That's far enough, Agent Thorne." Alexandra and Logan spun to find Jackson standing 20 feet away, a pistol aimed directly at them. Blood streaked from his nose where Alexandra had struck him earlier, but his hand was steady. More concerning was the dead-eyed calm that had replaced his earlier rage, a man who had moved beyond anger to cold calculation. "Your interference ends here," Jackson continued. "Drop the camera and weapons. Now." Alexandra's mind raced through options, calculating trajectories, distances, probabilities. The odds weren't good. They were exposed, with minimal cover between them and Jackson's gun. "Whatever they're paying you," she said, playing for time, "it's not worth it. You're looking at federal charges now. Assaulting an agent, interstate trafficking." Jackson's laugh was hollow. "You think this is about money? This is about power, about who controls the Southwest Corridor." He gestured toward the helicopter with his free hand. "That shipment is worth more than money. It's about reputation, territory, influence." "And my father?" Alexandra asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Was he just collateral damage in your power games?" Something flickered in Jackson's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "Thorne," he repeated. "Captain Jake Thorne, Afghanistan, 2018. A cruel smile spread across his face. "So that's why you're here. Daddy's little girl, out for revenge." The confirmation hit Alexandra like a physical blow. This man knew about her father, knew about his death. The connection she'd been seeking for years stood before her, a smoking gun in more ways than one. "He interfered too," Jackson continued, "stumbled onto something bigger than he understood. Just like you." Logan shifted almost imperceptibly beside Alexandra, the movement drawing Jackson's attention momentarily. It was the opening she needed. Her hand flashed to her boot, withdrawing a small throwing knife concealed there. With the precision born of countless training hours, she sent it spinning toward Jackson. The blade struck his hand, not a killing blow, but enough to disrupt his aim. His pistol discharged, the bullet going wild as he howled in pain. Logan was already moving, crossing the distance between them with astonishing speed for a man his size. What followed was brutal and efficient. Logan's fist connected with Jackson's jaw with a sickening impact. The Viper leader staggered but managed to slash outward with a concealed blade, opening a gash across Logan's forearm. Blood mixed with rain as the two men grappled in the mud, each seeking a decisive advantage. Alexandra moved to assist, but movement from her peripheral vision stopped her. Two more Vipers were approaching from behind a nearby vehicle, weapons drawn. She pivoted to face the new threat, her body automatically flowing into a combat stance. The first Viper rushed her, swinging a heavy chain in wide arcs. Alexandra ducked beneath it, then stepped inside his guard, delivering a series of rapid strikes to vulnerable pressure points. As he doubled over, she seized the chain, using his own momentum to send him crashing into his companion. The second Viper recovered quickly, revealing himself as more skilled than his fallen comrade. His attacks came in precise combinations, forcing Alexandra to give ground. A glancing blow caught her shoulder, sending a jolt of pain down her arm. She absorbed the impact, converted the energy into a spinning counterattack, that caught the man's temple with her elbow. As he crumpled to the ground, Alexandra turned back to Logan's fight with Jackson. The two men were still locked in combat, both bloodied, neither yielding. Jackson had managed to regain his footing, his fighting style revealing formal training beyond typical street brawling. He landed a vicious kick to Logan's injured ribs, drawing a grunt of pain from the Hell's Angel. Alexandra moved to intervene, but Logan waved her off with a determined gesture. "Get the evidence," he shouted through gritted teeth. "The helicopter's about to take off." He was right. The loading operation had accelerated, the helicopter's rotors increasing in speed as it prepared for departure. Whatever was in those crates, drugs, weapons, or evidence linking to her father's death, was about to disappear into the night. Alexandra made her decision. With a final glance at Logan, she sprinted toward the helicopter, camera ready to document whatever she could before it was too late. The rain lashed against her face as she navigated the muddy terrain, staying low to avoid detection. The helicopter crew, focused on their hasty departure, hadn't noticed her approach. She positioned herself behind a stack of empty pallets, lens focused on the remaining crates being loaded. What she saw made her blood run cold. These weren't drug packages or even conventional weapons. The markings on the crates were military grade, indicating specialized equipment with restricted export classification. One container had fallen open in the hurried loading, revealing the distinctive shape of advanced targeting systems, the kind used in high-precision missile platforms. Alexandra documented everything, her camera capturing serial numbers, markings, faces. This was bigger than a drug operation. This was international arms trafficking, potentially linked to terrorist organizations, and somehow connected to her father's death in Afghanistan years earlier. A sudden shout indicated she'd been spotted. One of the helicopter crew pointed in her direction, reaching for a weapon. Alexandra knew her position would be untenable within seconds. She took one final series of photos, then retreated, seeking cover as bullets began striking the pallets around her. The helicopter lifted off, its powerful downdraft creating a temporary rainless circle beneath it as water was pushed outward by the force of the rotors. Alexandra watched it ascend, memorizing its markings for later reporting. Even if it escaped now, the evidence she'd gathered would ensure a reckoning later. She turned her attention back to Logan and Jackson, just in time to see the climactic moment of their brutal confrontation. Logan, despite his injuries, had finally gained the upper hand. With a roar that carried even over the storm, he lifted Jackson bodily and slammed him onto the hood of a nearby vehicle. The impact was devastating, the Viper leader going limp instantly. Logan stood over his fallen opponent, chest heaving, blood mixing with rain as it ran down his face. For a moment, Alexandra feared he might deliver a killing blow to the unconscious man. Instead, Logan simply turned away, his expression grim but controlled. "Got what you needed?" he asked as she approached. Alexandra nodded, holding up the camera. "International arms trafficking, military-grade targeting systems. This isn't just drugs or guns. This is state-level weaponry." Logan's eyes widened slightly. "That explains the full-court press. That kind of merchandise is worth killing for," Alexandra finished, "and apparently worth killing my father for." The connection hung between them, a shared understanding of how personal this had become. Before they could discuss further, Frank's voice called out from the diner entrance. "Hostiles retreating. Looks like they're cutting their losses." The former naval officer stood at the doorway, shotgun still at the ready but pointed downward now. Indeed, the remaining Vipers were piling into their vehicles, abandoning their wounded in their haste to escape. The helicopter had disappeared into the storm clouds, taking its illegal cargo with it, but they had left something perhaps more valuable behind: evidence, prisoners, and a direct connection to Jake Thorne's death. Alexandra and Logan made their way back to the diner, both moving more slowly now as adrenaline ebbed and pain from various injuries asserted itself. The building had suffered significant damage: broken windows, bullet holes in walls, overturned furniture smoldering from the earlier fire. But it remained standing, a battered fortress that had held against the siege. Inside, Frank was attending to Old School, bandaging the older biker's leg where he'd taken a grazing bullet. Diesel was securing the Vipers who had been captured, using zip ties from Alexandra's supply. Hawk had emerged from his defensive position, holstering his service weapon as he surveyed the aftermath. I've made contact with my agency, Hawk said as Alexandra and Logan entered. They're coordinating with your people. Roads are still flooded, but they're finding alternate routes in. Should be here within 20 minutes. Alexandra nodded, her professional demeanor returning, despite the exhaustion pulling at her. We need to secure the scene, preserve evidence. Those prisoners are high value now, especially Jackson. She turned to retrieve the Viper leader, only to find Logan already dragging the unconscious man through the door. Jackson's face was swollen almost beyond recognition, but he was breathing. Logan deposited him none too gently on the floor. Package delivery, he said grimly. One scumbag arms dealer, slightly dented. Frank approached, offering towels to both of them. You're both bleeding and all over my floor, he said, a hint of his old gruffness returning. Though I guess a little more blood won't make much difference at this point. As they accepted the towels, Alexandra noticed Logan wince as he tried to wipe blood from his face. The cut above his eye had reopened, and his ribs were clearly causing him significant pain. Sit, she commanded, pointing to one of the few intact chairs. Let me look at that. Logan started to protest but thought better of it under her steady gaze. He sank into the chair with a poorly concealed grunt of pain. Alexandra found the first aid kit behind the counter and returned to examine Logan's wounds. Her touch was professional but gentle as she cleaned the cut on his forehead. Probably needs stitches, she concluded. Ribs might be cracked too, the way you're breathing. Logan shrugged, then immediately regretted the movement. Had worse. In Mosul, she said. It wasn't a question. Your father pulled me out of a collapsed building, Logan confirmed. 3 broken ribs, punctured lung, concussion. Carried me a half-mile to the extraction point under enemy fire. His voice softened. Never even told me his full name. Just Jake from Montana. Said if I ever needed anything. Look for the lightning, Alexandra finished. The words were familiar, her father's personal code. The reference to their family cabin in Montana where lightning storms were spectacular and frequent, a place where help could always be found. Logan's eyes met hers, recognition deepening. That watch he gave me right before the mission. It stopped working the exact moment he was hit. 14/22/37. I never fixed it, never changed the battery, kept it as a reminder. Alexander's composure wavered slightly. He used to say time was precious, not to be wasted. The irony of his watch stopping, he saved the right time for the right thing, Logan said quietly. That was Jake. Their moment of shared remembrance was interrupted by Hawk, who approached with urgency in his stride. We've got a problem, he said, indicating one of the captured Vipers who had regained consciousness. This one's talking, trying to cut a deal. Says the helicopter shipment was just a diversion. Alexandra and Logan both straightened, instantly alert. A diversion for what? Logan demanded. The real shipment is coming by road, Hawk explained, using the storm as cover. The flooding has forced Border Patrol to abandon regular checkpoints, focusing on rescue operations instead. When? Alexandra asked, already moving toward her radio. Tonight, within the hour, a convoy of 3 trucks carrying twice what was on that helicopter. Alexandra's mind raced through implications and options. We need to alert Border Patrol, state police, anyone still operational in this weather. There's more, Hawk said grimly. The trucks are heading here, to the Rusty Anchor. This was supposed to be the handoff point until we complicated things. That's why they hit so hard, why they were willing to risk attacking a public place. They needed to secure the location before the main shipment arrived. The revelation changed everything. What had seemed like the end of their ordeal was actually just the intermission. The real battle was still to come. How many personnel with the convoy? Logan asked, tactical mind already assessing the new threat. According to our friend, Hawk nodded toward the captured Viper, at least 12 heavily armed. Professional security, not just gang members. Alexander exchanged glances with Logan, both recognizing the gravity of their situation. They had survived one assault, but at a cost. Their defenses were compromised, ammunition was low, and everyone was injured to some degree. Backup was still at least 20 minutes away, and a heavily armed convoy would arrive sooner. But we need a new plan, Alexandra said, her voice steady despite the circumstances, and we need it now. Logan rose from his chair, wincing but determined. Then let's make one. He moved to what remained of the counter, clearing a space to lay out their options. "Frank, what resources do we have left?" As the others gathered around to formulate their strategy, Alexandra felt a curious sensation beneath the urgency and danger, a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. Her father's death, her undercover assignment, Logan's presence, even the storm that had isolated them, all converging to this moment, this opportunity to finish what Jake Thorne had started years ago, half a world away. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the landscape, rain and wind battering the battered diner. But inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, one born of determination, justice, and the unbreakable bonds forged in combat. Alexandra Thorne, Riley Matthews no longer, stood at its eye and ready to face whatever came next. The night's second act was about to begin, and this time they would be ready. The rusty Anchor Diner, once a haven for travelers seeking respite from their journeys, now stood as a battered fortress against the storm, both the natural tempest raging outside and the human conflict about to reach its crescendo within. What remained of the windows had been reinforced with whatever materials could be salvaged. Defensive positions had been established with strategic precision. Every available weapon had been distributed and every piece of potential evidence secured. Alexandra Thorne stood in the center of this makeshift command post, her rain-soaked hair pulled back tightly, eyes sharp with focus as she surveyed their preparations. The transformation from waitress to federal agent was now complete. No trace remained of the unassuming server who had poured coffee just hours earlier. "Convoy will approach from the south," she said, pointing to the map they had sketched on the back of a large menu. "3 trucks, heavily armed security. They'll expect the diner to be secure, thanks to Jackson's team. That surprise element is our only advantage." Logan nodded, his tactical mind analyzing each potential scenario. Despite the improvised butterfly bandages holding close the gash on his forehead and the tight wrapping around his ribs, he projected an aura of controlled power. "They'll send scouts first," he said. "Standard procedure for high-value shipments. 1 or 2 vehicles to confirm the location is secure before bringing in the main cargo." Hawk, his cover now fully blown after 2 years undercover with the Vipers, checked his service weapon methodically. "My agency credentials might buy us some time, but once they realize their advance team has been neutralized, they'll come in hard." Frank, the diner owner whose military bearing had fully resurfaced, stood by the reinforced front door, shotgun held with the comfortable familiarity of a much younger man. The haunted look that had shadowed his eyes for years had been replaced by clear, focused purpose. "How long until your people arrive?" he asked, glancing at Alexandra. She checked her watch, calculating distances against the worsening weather conditions. 20 minutes at best, maybe longer with the flooding. "And the convoy?" Old School asked from his position by the window, where he kept watch despite his injured leg. 10 minutes, maybe less," Hawk replied grimly. "We're on our own for the first wave." Diesel, the youngest of the Hells Angels, returned from checking their improvised defenses. "Barricades are set. If they follow the access road, they'll have to funnel right where we want them." Alexandra nodded approval, then gathered everyone closer. "This isn't just about stopping a weapons shipment anymore," she said, her voice low but carrying the weight of command. "This is about justice. For my father, for others who've died because of these operations. And it's about making sure these weapons never reach their intended targets." She looked at each person in turn, acknowledging the unlikely alliance they had formed. Federal agents, Hells Angels, a Navy veteran, all standing together against a common enemy. "Whatever happens," she concluded, "we hold until backup arrives. We protect the evidence. We finish what my father started." Logan's eyes met hers, a silent understanding passing between them. "For Jake," he said simply. "For Jake," she echoed. The others nodded, the mission crystallized in those 2 words. Each moved to their assigned positions, the diner falling into a tense silence broken only by the persistent drumming of rain against the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder. Alexandra took position behind the counter, where she had a clear line of sight to the main entrance while remaining partially concealed. Logan positioned himself near the kitchen door, providing coverage for the rear approach. Frank stood ready to deliver the initial shotgun blast that would signal the start of their defense. Hawk, Diesel, and Old School were strategically placed to create crossfire zones, ensuring no blind spots remained uncovered. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness, each second stretching like an hour as they waited. Alexandra found her mind drifting momentarily to other waitresses she had known at the Rusty Anchor, regular customers whose routines she had memorized, quiet moments wiping down tables in the early morning light. This place had become more than a cover. It had become a refuge of sorts, a pause between the violence that had marked her past and the uncertain future that awaited. Her thoughts were interrupted by the flash of headlights sweeping across the parking lot. Two SUVs approached slowly, their wipers working furiously against the downpour. "Scout vehicles," Logan confirmed in a hushed voice. "Just as expected." "Everyone hold," Alexander commanded over the secured radio channel they had established. "Let them come to us." The vehicles stopped about 50 yards from the diner. Four men emerged from each, moving with the practiced coordination of professional security operators rather than gang members. They wore tactical gear, despite their civilian appearance, and their weapons, visible even through the rain, were military grade. "These aren't street thugs," Hawk observed. "Private military contractors, maybe former special forces." "Makes sense for a shipment this valuable," Logan replied. "Question is, do they know something's wrong?" The answer came as the men spread out in a standard clearing formation, approaching the diner with weapons at the ready. Their caution suggested suspicion, but not certainty. "They're suspicious, but not committed," Alexandra assessed. "Wait for them to enter. We need them contained." The lead operators reached the entrance, trying to peer through the partially covered windows. Finding visibility limited, two positioned themselves on either side of the door while another prepared to enter. "Steady," Alexandra whispered. The door opened slowly, the bell above it jingling with incongruous cheerfulness. One man entered, weapon sweeping the apparently empty diner. "Clear," he called to his companions outside, triggering their entry. As the fourth man crossed the threshold, Alexandra gave the signal. "Now." Frank's shotgun roared. The blast deliberately aimed above the intruders' heads, designed to disorient rather than kill. Simultaneously, Diesel activated the improvised flashbangs they had created from kitchen chemicals and electrical components. The disorienting combination of sound and light achieved its purpose. The operators staggered, momentarily blinded and deafened. In that critical window, Alexandra, Logan, and the others emerged from their positions, weapons trained on the stunned men. "Federal agents," Alexandra shouted with commanding authority. "Weapons down, on the ground." To their credit, the operators assessed the situation with professional speed. Realizing they were outnumbered and outpositioned, they made the tactical decision to comply, slowly lowering their weapons and kneeling on the floor. "Secure them," Alexandra ordered. "Quickly, the convoy will be expecting confirmation soon." As Hawk and Diesel bound the captured men with zip ties, Logan retrieved one of their radio units, listening to the encrypted channel. "Convoy's holding position 3 miles out," he reported, "waiting for the all-clear signal from these guys." Alexandra nodded, mind racing through options. "We need to draw them in, make them think everything's proceeding according to plan." "I can imitate their radio protocol," Hawk offered. "Might buy us a few minutes." "Do it," Alexandra agreed. "Tell them the location is secure, but mention a minor complication. Local police patrol or something that would explain a slight delay." As Hawk worked on the deception, Logan approached one of the captured operators, a hard-faced man with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "Who's your client?" Logan demanded. The man stared back impassively. "Independent contractor. I don't ask questions beyond the operational parameters. Those parameters include trafficking weapons that kill American soldiers," Alexander said, stepping forward. "The same kinds of weapons that killed my father in Afghanistan." Something flickered in the man's eyes, not guilt, but perhaps recognition. "Thorne," he said, the name clearly registering. "You're Jake Thorne's kid." Alexandra felt her pulse quicken. "You knew him?" The operator's expression hardened again. "I know the name, that's all." Before Alexandra could press further, Hawk interrupted. "Convoy's moving again. They bought the delay story, but they'll be here in 5 minutes." The moment of potential revelation passed as they refocused on the immediate threat. Alexandra turned to Frank. "Get these men secured in the freezer with the others. We need to reset our positions." As Frank and Diesel led the prisoners away, Logan pulled Alexandra aside. That operator recognized your father's name. There's a connection here deeper than we thought. I know, she replied, frustration evident in her voice, but we don't have time to pursue it now. Logan nodded, understanding the priorities of the moment. What's our play with the convoy? They're bringing more firepower than we can match. Alexander considered their options, weighing risks against dwindling time. We maintain the deception as long as possible. Let the first truck enter the lot. Hit them when they're vulnerable during unloading. And if the deception fails? Her eyes met his, resolve hardening. Then we hold them off until backup arrives. These weapons don't leave here tonight. The tactical discussion was interrupted by a sudden, blinding flash of lightning that illuminated the entire diner, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging the building into darkness. Power's out, Frank announced unnecessarily as he returned from securing the prisoners. Generator? Alexander asked. Frank shook his head. Hasn't worked in months. The loss of power complicated their already precarious situation. Without lights, their carefully planned defensive positions would be compromised. The night vision advantage would shift to the convoy security team, who likely carried proper equipment. Logan moved to the window, peering through a gap in the coverings. Headlights approaching. 3 sets. Convoys here. Alexandra made a rapid decision. Change of plans. We use the darkness. Frank, old school, maintain positions inside. The rest of us move outside, use the parked vehicles for cover. We need to disrupt their operation before they can establish a perimeter. The revised strategy was risky but played to their strengths, mobility and surprise rather than a static defense with limited firepower. Logan nodded approval, recognizing the tactical soundness despite the danger. They moved quickly, slipping out the rear exit into the still raging storm. The rain provided additional cover, reducing visibility and masking sounds as they positioned themselves around the parking lot. Alexandra, Logan, Hawk, and Diesel spread out, creating a loose perimeter around the area where the trucks would likely stop. The convoy approached slowly, headlights cutting through the rain. 3 large box trucks, each with an escort SUV. As predicted, they pulled into the parking lot in a practice formation, creating a defensible triangle with the lead truck pointed toward the diner entrance. Armed guards emerged first, establishing a security perimeter before the truck drivers exited their vehicles. Alexandra counted at least 12 security personnel, confirming the intelligence they had received. These men moved differently from the scouts, more cautious, more experienced. The stakes had just risen considerably. Hold positions, Alexandra whispered into her radio. Wait for my signal. The lead security officer approached the diner entrance, speaking into his radio, presumably trying to contact the advance team. When no response came, his posture changed subtly, alert to potential danger. He signaled to his team, and their formation tightened. 2 men moved toward the diner door, weapons at the ready. Alexandra realized their deception had failed. They're suspicious, she radioed to the others. Prepare to engage on my mark. Before she could give the order, the situation escalated on its own. One of the security team members spotted movement near where Diesel was positioned. A warning shout went up, followed immediately by gunfire. The carefully planned ambush dissolved into chaos. Alexandra seized the moment, targeting the nearest truck driver with a precise shot that struck his shoulder, disabling without killing. Logan engaged 2 security personnel simultaneously, his Navy SEAL training evident in his economy of movement in lethal precision. Hawk provided covering fire from his position, forcing several guards to seek shelter behind their vehicles. Inside the diner, Frank's shotgun boomed, taking out the floodlights mounted on the lead truck and plunging the scene into deeper darkness. Alexandra moved from cover to cover, working her way toward the lead truck. The manifest, the shipping documents, any evidence of who was behind the operation would be there. Through the firefight, she maintained focus on the primary objective, secure evidence linking these weapons to her father's death. A security guard emerged suddenly from behind a vehicle, nearly colliding with her. Alexandra reacted instinctively, striking upward with the heel of her hand into the man's chin, following with a swift kick to the knee. As he crumpled, she secured his weapon and continued toward the truck. Logan, meanwhile, had engaged the lead security officer, a man whose movements and tactics screamed military background. Their fight was a blur of expert strikes and counters, 2 elite operators testing each other's limits. The driver's cab, Alexandra shouted to Logan as she approached the truck. I need cover. Logan acknowledged with a quick nod, adjusting his position to provide suppressing fire as Alexandra made her dash for the truck. Bullets ricocheted off metal surfaces around her as she ran, the distance seeming to stretch impossibly. She reached the cab, yanking open the door and pulling herself inside. The interior was dark, but her trained hands quickly located the expected documentation: shipping manifests, destination coordinates, authorization codes. She stuffed everything into a waterproof pouch, securing the crucial evidence. A sudden impact rocked the truck as one of the security team crashed against the driver's door, trying to reach her. Alexandra kicked outward, catching the man in the chest and sending him stumbling backward into the rain. As she prepared to exit the vehicle, a familiar voice came through her radio, strained but determined. Agent Thorne, be advised. Federal backup is 5 minutes out. Interstate Task Force fully mobilized. Relief washed through her momentarily, but the respite was short-lived. Through the rain-streaked windshield, she spotted Logan locked in brutal combat with the security lead. Despite his injuries from earlier, Logan was holding his own, but his opponent had drawn a combat knife that gleamed dully in the scattered light. Alexandra vaulted from the truck, moving to assist. Before she could reach them, the security lead gained momentary advantage, driving his knife toward Logan's exposed side. In that critical moment, time seemed to slow. Alexandra saw Logan twist at the last possible instant, the blade missing its intended target but slicing across his arm instead. Blood immediately darkened his already wet sleeve, but the wound only seemed to fuel his determination. With a roar that carried even over the storm, Logan caught his attacker's wrist, twisting with devastating force until the knife fell from nerveless fingers. His follow-up strike caught the man squarely in the throat, dropping him to his knees, gasping for air. Alexandra reached Logan's side, assessing his injury quickly. How bad? I'll live, he grunted, applying pressure to the wound. The evidence? She patted the waterproof pouch. Got it. Backup's 5 minutes out. Logan nodded grimly. We need to hold them until then. The battle continued around them, Hawk and Diesel maintaining pressure on the remaining security personnel, while Frank and Old School defended the diner. The advantage had shifted subtly in their favor, the element of surprise compensating for their inferior numbers. Then disaster struck. One of the security team, realizing they were losing the battle, made a desperate decision. He reached into his tactical vest and withdrew what was unmistakably a military-grade grenade. Fire in the hole, Hawk shouted, spotting the threat. The warning came just in time. Alexandra and Logan dove behind the nearest cover, an overturned picnic table from the diner's outdoor seating area. The explosion ripped through the night, shaking the ground and sending shrapnel in all directions. When Alexandra raised her head, ears ringing from the blast, she saw that the explosion had served its purpose. The security team was using the distraction to regroup around the trucks, preparing for a final stand. They're getting desperate, Logan observed. That's good and bad. They might surrender, or they might destroy the evidence. Alexandra nodded, understanding the implications. We need to end this now. She keyed her radio. All units, converge on the lead truck. Concentrated effort. The response was immediate. Hawk and Diesel began moving to flank the security team from opposite directions. Frank emerged from the diner, shotgun booming to provide cover fire. Even Old School, despite his injured leg, had taken up a position with clear sightlines to support the assault. Alexandra and Logan moved in tandem, years of separate training somehow synchronizing into perfect coordination. They leapfrogged from cover to cover, each protecting the other's advance with precise suppressing fire. The security team, recognizing the coordinated attack, began to falter. Several broke formation, attempting to retreat toward the remaining SUVs. Others maintained discipline, establishing a defensive perimeter around the lead truck. Something's in that truck they're protecting, Logan said between controlled bursts of fire. Something more valuable than weapons. Alexandra agreed. The security team's behavior had changed, becoming more desperate to protect the lead vehicle. Whatever was inside represented the true prize of tonight's operation. A fresh barrage of gunfire forced them back into cover temporarily. As they waited for an opening, Logan turned to Alexandra, his expression intense despite the blood and rain streaming down his face. Jake would be proud, he said simply. Whatever happens next. The words struck Alexandra deeply. Throughout her career, she had carried her father's legacy as both burden and inspiration. To hear his former comrade speak of his pride felt like a benediction of sorts. "He'd be proud of both of us," she replied. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a new sound cutting through the storm. Sirens, multiple sets, approaching rapidly. "Backups arrived," Hawk called over the radio. "Federal tactical units, state police, county sheriff. They've got the access road blocked." The security team heard it too. Their resistance faltered as they realized their escape routes were cut off. Several dropped their weapons, raising hands in surrender. Others fought on with increasing desperation. Alexandra keyed her radio. "All friendlies, identify yourselves to incoming federal agents. Yellow armbands in the left equipment bag." The instruction was vital. In the chaos of the storm and firefight, the arriving federal agents would have difficulty distinguishing allies from targets. The yellow emergency bands from Frank's Diner Supplies would serve as makeshift identification. As Hawk moved to retrieve and distribute the bands, a sudden movement near the lead truck caught Alexandra's attention. The security lead, whom Logan had disabled earlier, had regained consciousness and was dragging himself toward the truck's cab. "He's going for something in the truck," Alexandra warned. "Cover me!" She broke from cover, sprinting toward the vehicle. Logan laid down suppressing fire, forcing the remaining security personnel to keep their heads down. Alexandra reached the truck seconds before the security lead. She tackled him as he was reaching for the door, both of them crashing into the mud. They grappled briefly, the man's training evident, but his injuries hampering his effectiveness. With a decisive strike to an already injured throat, Alexandra incapacitated him. She rose quickly, alert for other threats, then turned her attention to the truck cab. What she found inside made her blood run cold. Sitting in the passenger seat, bound and gagged, but very much alive, was a man in his 50s wearing the tattered remains of what had once been an expensive suit. His face was bruised, indicating rough treatment, but his eyes were alert and defiant. Alexandra recognized him immediately from briefing photos. Senator Michael Collins, chairman of the Defense Appropriations Committee, reported missing 3 days earlier during a fact-finding trip to the border. "Senator Collins," she said, quickly removing his gag. "I'm Special Agent Alexandra Thorne, FBI. Are you injured?" "Nothing serious," the senator replied, his voice hoarse but steady as she worked on his restraints. "But we need to secure that shipment. It's not just weapons, it's classified targeting technology bound for Iran. Part of a much larger conspiracy." Alexandra froze momentarily. "Iran? The same country linked to the ambush that killed my father?" Collins looked at her with sudden recognition. "Thorne, Captain Jake Thorne's daughter." He nodded grimly. "Yes, the same network. Your father discovered part of it during his last deployment. That's why he was targeted." The revelation hit Alexandra like a physical blow. The connection she had been seeking for years finally crystallizing into horrible clarity. Her father hadn't died in random enemy fire. He had been deliberately eliminated because he'd uncovered this same weapons smuggling network. Before she could process the implications fully, Logan appeared at the truck door. "Federal teams are securing the perimeter," he reported. "We need to move." Alexandra helped the senator from the vehicle. "We have a high-value witness, Senator Collins." Logan's eyes widened slightly, but his military training kept him focused on immediate priorities. "Area's not fully secured. We need to get him to safety." They moved quickly through the diminishing firefight, the arrival of federal tactical teams having turned the tide decisively. More of the security personnel had surrendered, though a few pockets of resistance remained. As they reached the relative safety of the diner, Alexandra spotted a familiar figure directing the federal response. Assistant Director Harmon, her direct superior at the Bureau. The senior agent's presence underscored the significance of what they had uncovered tonight. "Agent Thorne," Harmon acknowledged as they approached, "I see your undercover operation yielded unexpected dividends." His gaze shifted to Senator Collins. "Senator, medical personnel are standing by." "In a moment," Collins said firmly. "First, I need to brief you on what I've learned. There are more shipments planned, and high-level officials involved." As medical teams and federal agents swarmed the area, Alexandra found herself momentarily apart from the activity, watching as her world recalibrated around the night's revelations. 2 years of undercover work, driven by the need to understand her father's death, had led to this moment. Logan appeared beside her, his arm now properly bandaged by a paramedic. Your father was right about you, he said quietly. Stubborn as hell, and exactly where you needed to be, when it mattered most. Alexandra smiled slightly, the expression feeling strange after the intensity of the night. I had help. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as federal agents secured the weapons, documented evidence, and processed prisoners. The storm had begun to abate, the worst of its fury spent, much like the human conflict it had witnessed. What happens now? Logan asked eventually. Debriefing, testimonies, trials, Alexandra replied. The senator's evidence will help dismantle the entire network. My cover here is blown, so I'll be reassigned. Logan nodded, understanding the transient nature of their alliance. In the Hells Angels, we did provide assistance to a federal operation. Alexandra smiled again, more genuinely this time. I'll make sure that's noted prominently in my report. Should earn you some consideration. Their conversation was interrupted as Frank approached, his shotgun now safely stowed and his bearing once again that of a diner owner rather than a naval officer. Place is a mess, he observed dryly, surveying the bullet-riddled walls and broken windows of his establishment. I'm sorry, Frank, Alexandra said. The Bureau will cover damages, of course. Frank waved away her concern. Insurance will handle most of it. Besides, he added with unexpected warmth, some things are worth the pain. His gaze drifted to the wall of photographs in his office, visible through the shattered window. The frame that had been mysteriously turned face down was now upright, revealing its contents. A group photo of naval intelligence officers, including a younger Frank and Jake Thorne, Alexandra's father. He was the best of us, Frank said simply. Too damn honest for his own good. Alexandra felt a lump form in her throat. You knew him well? Served together for 15 years, Frank confirmed. When he died, I couldn't stay in. The nightmares, the guilt. He trailed off, then straightened. When you showed up 2 years ago, I knew who you were immediately. Jake's eyes, Jake's determination. I figured you had your reasons for keeping quiet, so I respected that. The pieces clicked into place. Frank's immediate hiring of her, without questions, his protective attitude despite his apparent anxiety, his knowledge of her father. He had been a silent guardian all along. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. Frank nodded once, then turned back toward his battered diner. Got a lot of cleaning up to do. Might need some help. Count on it, Logan repeated, clapping the older man on the shoulder. As Frank moved away, Assistant Director Harmon approached, his expression serious but satisfied. Senator Collins has given us preliminary information, he informed Alexandra. This operation has implications reaching into multiple federal agencies and foreign governments. The weapons smuggling is just the surface. Alexandra nodded, unsurprised. And my father's connection? Captain Thorne uncovered financial irregularities during his last deployment, Harmon confirmed. He was compiling evidence against several high-ranking officials when he was killed. The senator has documents corroborating his findings. The validation of her suspicions that her father had been murdered to silence him brought a complex mixture of emotions. Grief refreshed, but also a sense of vindication and purpose fulfilled. What happens to the investigation now? She asked. It becomes multi-agency, high priority, Harmon replied. We'll need your complete debrief and ongoing involvement. Your undercover phase is complete, but your role in this case is just beginning. As the assistant director moved away to coordinate with other agency representatives, Logan studied Alexandra thoughtfully. You finally have answers, he observed. Was it worth it? Alexandra considered the question, weighing the personal cost of 2 years undercover against the closure she had sought. Yes, she decided. Not just for me or for my father, but for everyone these weapons would have killed. She paused, then added, what about you? The Hells Angels aren't known for cooperating with federal investigations. Logan smiled slightly, the expression transforming his weathered features. Let's just say my priorities shifted tonight. Some debts run deeper than club loyalty. The implication was clear. His debt to her father had outweighed other considerations. Dawn was breaking now, the first hints of sunlight penetrating the dissipating storm clouds. Federal teams continued their methodical processing of the scene, cataloging evidence and securing prisoners for transport. The rusty Anchor diner, despite its damage, stood resilient against the lightning sky. 6 months later, the rusty Anchor reopened. The bullet holes had been patched, windows replaced, furniture restored. Yet subtle changes marked its evolution. Reinforced doors, better security cameras, a new private room in the back for meetings of a certain nature. Frank Weston still managed the place, but with a new ease in his bearing. The PTSD that had haunted him for years had receded, though not disappeared entirely. His wall of photographs had expanded, now including a framed newspaper article about the weapons smuggling bust in the subsequent federal investigation. Alexandra Thorne, no longer undercover, but now leading the ongoing task force investigating the weapons network, visited when her schedule allowed. She would sit at the counter, drinking coffee and sharing quiet conversations with Frank about her father, their shared history, the legacy that continued. Logan Sullivan remained with the Hells Angels, but rumors suggested the club had undergone internal changes, distancing itself from certain criminal enterprises while strengthening community connections. When federal operations needed intelligence or assistance regarding motorcycle clubs, a specific name was often suggested as a reliable contact. On the anniversary of the night that had changed everything, they gathered at the Rusty Anchor. Alexandra, Logan, Frank, Hawk, Diesel, and Old School. No longer thrown together by circumstance, but bound by choice and shared experience. As they raised their glasses in a toast to absent friends, Alexandra glanced at Logan's wrist. He no longer wore her father's broken watch. Instead, a new one had taken its place. Still a G-Shock, but functional, moving forward. "You fixed it," she observed. Logan shook his head. "Not fixed, replaced. The old one did its job, reminded me of what was lost. This one," he tapped the new watch, "reminds me of what was found." Frank cleared his throat, raising his glass higher. "To Jake," he said simply. "To Jake," they echoed. Outside, lightning flashed across the distant sky, a summer storm brewing on the horizon. But within the walls of the Rusty Anchor, all was calm, a sanctuary forged in conflict, strengthened by truth, and sustained by the bonds that form when ordinary people stand together against extraordinary darkness. For Alexandra Thorne, daughter of Jake, the journey that had begun with seeking her father's killer had evolved into something more profound, carrying forward his work, his principles, his legacy. The closure she had sought had transformed into continuation, a baton passed from one generation to the next. As the night deepened around them, their conversation turned to the future. The weapons network investigation continued to yield results, dismantling operations across borders, bringing accountability to places long accustomed to operating in shadows. Alexandra shared updates on Senator Collins, who had become a powerful ally in legislative efforts to close the loopholes that had enabled the weapons trafficking. Hawk, now assigned to a border task force, reported on decreased smuggling activity as the network's infrastructure collapsed. Logan spoke little of Hell's Angels business, maintaining appropriate boundaries, but his occasional insights proved valuable to Alexandra's ongoing investigations. Their professional relationship had developed a reputation within federal agencies, an unusual alliance that yielded consistent results. Frank eventually stood, excusing himself to close up the diner. As the others helped with the simple tasks of shutting down for the night, Alexandra found herself before the wall of photographs, studying her father's face in the old Naval Intelligence Group photo. "He would be proud," Logan said quietly, joining her. "Not just of what you did that night, but of what you've done since." Alexandra nodded, accepting the truth in his words. "I used to think finding his killers would bring peace, but it wasn't about ending something. It was about continuing." "That's how legacy works," Logan agreed. "Not preserved like a museum piece, but carried forward, adapted, built upon." Outside, the storm had arrived in earnest, rain lashing against the windows. But the Rusty Anchor stood firm, a beacon in the darkness for travelers seeking shelter, just as it had always been, though now perhaps with a deeper understanding what shelter truly meant. As they prepared to leave, Alexandra paused at the door, looking back at the diner that had been her home and cover for 2 years. So much had changed, yet the essence remained, a place where journeys intersected, where storms could be weathered, where unexpected alliances could form. "Same time next year?" Frank asked, his gruff voice carrying a warmth that had once been carefully hidden. Alexandra smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. Wouldn't miss it. Lightning flashed again as they stepped outside, illuminating the parking lot where their battle had raged. Nature had long since washed away the physical evidence of that night, but its impact remained. In policies changed, in networks dismantled, in lives redirected. Logan paused beside his motorcycle, rain beating on his leather jacket. Your father had a saying, he recalled. In the darkest storms, look for the lightning. It shows the path forward, if only for a moment. Alexandra nodded, remembering those same words from her childhood. He said, lightning reminds us that even in darkness, clarity is possible. As if in response, another bolt split the sky, momentarily turning night to day. In that flash of illumination, Alexandra saw not just her present companions, but felt the presence of those who had come before. Her father and all who had stood against corruption and violence, creating brief moments of clarity in a complex world. The legacy continued, not as a burden to be carried, but as a light to follow. Not in the absence of storms, but in the courage to face them, navigate them, and emerge on the other side. Changed perhaps, but unbroken. The path forward, she echoed, stepping into the rain with certainty in her stride. Behind them, the rusty anchor's lights remained on, a small but defiant glow against the gathering darkness, a reminder that some places, like some people, stand firm when storms rage, becoming not just shelters but beacons for others seeking their way home. And in the heart of the storm, there was peace.